Aloha, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I know we have some people still logging on. Um, I think I'll just talk a little bit about Access Lex while we're doing that. And if that sounds okay. So Access Lex is a nonprofit, and we partner with all the law schools across the U.S. to provide access to free resources and tools to help individuals access law school, complete law school, and then just live a nice, enjoyable life um, based on what's available, with them. So as part of that, we created Max Pre-Law, which is a pre-law program designed just for law school students. And again, those resources are free to you, and I'll show you how to log on to them later on. Because we're a nonprofit, we always have to start off with reading this disclaimer, which is the information provided in Max Pre-Law by Access Lex Events and other Max resources is being made available to assist you in developing your personal financial strategy and is not intended as investment, tax, or legal advice. And you should always consider whether the information is appropriate for your needs and where applicable, seek advice from an appropriate professional advisor. So sometimes we might be making some tax references or things like that, and maybe you have to talk to an accountant or CPA or things like that. Ask Edna is the platform that allows you access to all of those free tools and resources. All you have to do is log on to Ask Edna at accesslex.org and create a pre-law account, and it's going to let you have access to everything. So we're going to talk a little bit about paying for law school today, and I'm joined by Heather Smith Lee, who is the Director of Financial Aid. So we are in good health. Between the both of us, I think we'll be able to answer any of the questions that you might have. And again, our goal is to make sure you get your questions answered. So please feel free to use the chat panel, type that in, and we'll go from there. But what we're going to talk about is really just understanding what's going on. So the average law school costs, what's involved in the application process, what is the type of financial aid that's available, and then obviously student loans as well. So really, when it all begins, it's about the average law school cost. And if you're thinking about, of course, the University of Hawaii, you are already ahead of the game because the average law school costs are so much better than the national costs across the US. But things that often are overlooked are the pre-law costs. Like, there's actually money that you have to spend before you even get to law school. And some of that are the things like these registration fees and the GRE fees, other related costs like the exam prep and things like that. And that adds up really quickly. So I want to just give you a hint right here on some of this for the exam prep costs. I know that PAC has a really good website where there are several free bar prep related resources available for you. So that can also kind of keep the costs down. If you're thinking about applying to more than one school, application expenses are $90 or more. If you end up going to like a pre-law fair or something like that, and where there's more than one school, or even if you're doing it virtually, I would encourage you to see if you can get an application fee waiver right there and then. A lot of the schools are doing that. And so if you're at a fair and you have more than one or two schools that you're interested in, see if you can get a fee waiver and ask them about that. Now, when you put together your credentialing stuff, that costs another $195, and then it's another $45 each for the additional reports. So it adds up really rather quickly. The one thing that I think is the most challenging, though, are the school deposits. And that is something, what happens right here is each school has, once they award you and tell you you've been accepted, at a certain point, they want you to say, okay, I'm making that commitment to you. And part of that is putting down that deposit. And some schools will have one and two deposits. And I guess, Heather, how many deposits do you have?
At Richardson, we just have the one deposit. I believe it's $250.
Oh, nice. See, again, so that's really awesome. But for most schools, if you were considering something else, some of them have, it's usually $500 and sometimes there are two. And so I've actually spoken with students, not at Richardson, but other students were accepted to some schools and then couldn't go because they didn't have the seat deposits. And the problem with that is because you don't have your financial aid money yet. So that's something that you need to think of beforehand, because your financial aid for school, you're not going to get until you start. And these are costs that are going to really happen to you before you even attend the university. So here are some of the average costs, and you can see that across the board, you'll be looking at, whether it's public resident or non-resident and private. You can see that can vary greatly. The thing that may be more consistent, especially in a geographic area, is of course the average living expenses. So what happens is, as part of the transparency by the Department of Education, each school is required every year to go out and figure out what are the average costs for living that need to be displayed on the school's website. So you can always go onto the financial aid department of every school's website and look and see these are the average living expenses. So the average living expenses are the average for that area. Would be totally different in Hawaii or Los Angeles or New York or North Dakota. Those are the average ones. You could be below that or you could be above that. And it's just really to help individuals get a clear idea of what the costs would be. And so what you would look at is you're looking at, this is an average amount for in 2018. So the total that was borrowed both for undergraduate and law school nationwide was $145,000. Generally, the capitalized interest adds up pretty quickly, and that's about $23,000. So the estimated total debt at repayment is like $168,000. Now that sounds like a lot of money, and it is actually. So, but I want you to know that there are, even though this is the estimated monthly payments that are in the standard repayment plan or even in the extended repayment plan, there are other repayment plans that allow you for a much lower payment. And if you're thinking later on, maybe going public service, there's also different ways to manage those expenses. So just looking at it holistically, don't let that scare you right at the beginning. And then just know that if you're going to stay at Richardson, you're going to be in way below usually that average. But the cost of attendance generally is the direct costs, which you have no control over, such as tuition and fees. Where you have the most control is in this living expenses and other expenses. And generally it's food and rent and transportation. Those are the ones that really eat up most of it. If you're under the age of 26, you can also sometimes at different schools continue to keep your parents' health insurance, and then you don't have to pay for actual health insurance. If you have insurance that is pretty much the same or equitable as the insurance that would be offered through the school, sometimes you can save a little money doing that way. But most of the time, it's the rent and food. And like when my son went to med school, it was also like all hands on deck because we didn't have a lot of money. And his just housing and food was like $20,000 a year, which was a lot of money. I was getting heart palpitations from that. And so one of the things that he did is he ended up getting a roommate for all 4 years and cut that in half. And so that's saved over 4 years, $40,000, right? That's pretty much like $70,000 that you don't have to repay. So I always like to look at where is the big money, where you could save some big money that really has some impact. And then you could still, enjoy the other things in life. Now, once you figure that out, then it's about figuring out your net cost. And so, for example, you might have the cost of attendance, which is this cost of attendance of $64,000, and then you're maybe getting a scholarship of $15,000 and another grant. And the difference between a scholarship and grant oftentimes is that one is merit-based and one is need-based. And that depends, though, at each institution, but you can benefit from both merit and need. And so you might get these scholarships awards. And so that leaves you then with a balance of that $40,000, which means you have to come up with that. That's your out-of-pocket cost. And generally how that goes is that every student, because they are going to be a law student, has access to this $20,500, which is not even credit-based. It is just because you're going to school, you're going to law school, and everybody has access to that. That is the first thing that's going to get awarded. Then you also have access to Grad Plus. Now that does have a small credit check in it, but it really just checks to see if you have any adverse credit, and it's only like $2,500 or something like that. So most individuals know that between the cost of attendance and the free money and the grant that they're going to get, most individuals then fund the rest of their education using unsubsidized loans and the Grad Plus, and you can borrow all the way up to the cost of attendance. So no matter where you decide to go, there's always going to be enough money for you to access to go to that particular school. Now, you could also have savings and gifts and working and things like that. And working in particular is going to be something like after your first year, for example, you can start working, because your first year, you really want to make sure that you are in with the institution, you feel well about everything, what you need to do, your responsibilities, your academics, all those type of things. But then after that, you can start working, and that can also contribute to that. Now, most people will use grants, scholarships, and student loans. And like I said, they will also after their first year, if you're not going to a part-time program where you're also working already, sometimes they have personal resources. But it really is these grants and scholarships that's primarily, and student loans, that is primarily most of it. So when you're looking at the types of financial aid, you have the employment, which is also a work study. And work study, what I like about that is if it's available at the particular institution. I like that because, first of all, the money that you earn doesn't count towards next year financial aid when they determine your financial aid, but also you get to know everybody on campus. And when people get to know you on campus, then when opportunities arise, they're like, hey, you know what? You were interested in such and such, and this opportunity came up. And so it really builds that social capital. And I think that's very important. Then you have, of course, student loans. And with student loans, you have both the option of federal student loans and private student loans. And for the most part, I would always say exhaust federal student loans if you can, because they have a lot more benefits in them. They have better protections if something happens to you, and they're pretty much guaranteed. In some cases, some people will go with private loans because maybe they have a co-signer and maybe they have a parent or partner that has an existing relationship. But private loans, again, if something were to happen, those are things that would go against your estate, where federal student loans would not. So there is some things to think about. And then lastly, it's that scholarships and grants. And I think one of the things that students do really well in that first year is look for scholarships, right? And then in year 2 and year 3, they kind of forget about it, even though that there is money. There's a lot of money out there. Sometimes the school has particular donors who support 2Ls and 3Ls. And so it is good to continue to look for that, in all 3 years. And even starting right now with pre-law. And so we created this Access Lex data bank through COVID when we were all grounded and couldn't travel at all. And so we tried to find all of the scholarships for both pre-law, 1Ls, 2Ls, and 3Ls, and put them in one location. And the great thing, what I learned about it when I was putting this together, if you're using this as an approach to try and find free money regularly, here's what I would recommend. You're going to write a personal statement. And that personal statement is going to show why you want to go to law school, what's motivating, what's highlighting, and things like that. In this data bank, the scholarship providers either ask for a 1-page essay, a 2-page essay, or a 3-page essay. So I would say take your personal statement that you wrote or that you're going to be writing and collapse that into a 1-pager, 2-pager, or 3-pager. The other thing that they're asking for is unofficial transcripts. So get your unofficial transcripts from your undergraduate institution and have those ready. And then once a month, take a couple of hours aside and start looking for scholarships. If you already have your unofficial transcripts ready and you already have a 1-pager, a 2-pager, or a 3-pager that you just need to tweak, it's going to be a really easy process to continue to look for those scholarships. And again, in 2L year and 3L year, make sure you stop by and ask Heather, are there any more 2L, 3L scholarships? Because those type of things do come out. So that's really the one thing I would encourage you, is that you just really build that into your mindset, that you can look for free money all 3 years, and I would encourage you to do that. When you apply for financial aid, there's a process that everybody uses. So everybody has to start with the FAFSA. That's kind of the equalizing playing field, right? No matter if you have a lot of money or you have no money, everybody goes and completes the FAFSA form. Now, what's kind of interesting is there used to be questions asked about parents, and they used to ask for parent information, and they're going to stop doing that, which is kind of good. But the parent information was used by institutions primarily to give away their own funds. So not their state funding or anything like that, but it was their institutional funds. And so even though you're going to complete the FAFSA and you're no longer having to provide parental information, you may still provide that in a different way to an institution that you apply to, so that they can look at determining how much aid they want to give you in institutional aid that's available for specific students. So that's one of the things. Now, here's the process, right? You're going to figure out the schools. You want to make sure that you know the due dates for everything, because it is really true. The early bird will get the worm. The free money goes away really fast, right? It comes, the sooner the better. So if you're debating about, I'm going to try and get a better LSAT score, or maybe should I wait? Sometimes that's one of the things you really want to discuss with somebody seriously, because the longer you wait in the application process, most of the free money will be gone. And that means that you're going to have to rely mostly on loans. And so being very strategic, if you're trying to keep, your debt down, and you have a good GPA, and I would encourage you right now is continue to build that GPA as high as you can, because that and your LSAT score are really still those two big focuses that where the money gets awarded. But make sure you know the application deadlines and be cognizant of that. And then again, applying for grants and scholarships, and then you do the financial aid, the FAFSA.gov, and then you're going to review your offers. And when you review your offers, what you want to do is you want to compare apples to apples, right? So you want to look and make sure that, okay, what are they giving me? Sometimes when I talk to students, they say, oh, I got a full ride. Everything's taken care of. But they look at it and they look at the information that's the unsubsidized funds and also the plus loan. They look at that as, in their mind, as it was a scholarship or a grant, right? Because at the bottom it says zero, like, you have this grant and you have that, and then you got this and this, and they're like, oh, it's all paid for. And it isn't. So you have to really look at that to see what is the aid that's offered, what is it all cost, the renewal criteria, and then looking at really your out-of-pocket expenses. And again, you can use some worksheets like this, the cost school comparison, where you put in comparing apple to apple and really understanding then what are my out-of-pocket costs. Because one of the things when you're looking at comparing schools, depending on the field that you want to go into, you can see, you might be able to get into 3 or 4 different schools, right? And depending on the type of work that you want to do in the legal field, or that you're thinking about you want to do in the legal field, it might change as you go to law school. That happens all the time. People start with one area that they want to do, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I love this. But one of the things that you can do is, if you're interested about a certain field, is when you review the school's website, and okay, this is the average cost. You can also go and review and see the average scholarships that are awarded. Then you can go to the career services website and see where graduates are being placed and how much they're earning. And then you can compare that. You might go to one school where you have a actually low cost of attendance, and you're still going to earn the same amount of money, versus going to a school that has a higher cost of attendance that may be a little bit more prestigious. But really, when you're looking at it at the end, the graduates are still earning the same amount of money. And so when you're starting to think about it in that perspective, which is what is it that you want to do, and how much do you need to borrow, and what is most effective, right? So the other thing that when you receive your scholarships, sometimes you have an opportunity to ask schools to revisit that. But what you need to do is you need to be able to really make a case. So for example, I had one student that I was talking to, and she was very surprised. And again, this is just from somebody in, in the United States, not in Hawaii or anything like that. It was just a student I was talking to. And so she got into a school in Florida, actually. And she said, I'm so surprised I didn't get any scholarships. And I just don't know why, you know? And so one of the things that we did is we looked at what her GPA was, what her LSAT score, and then we went on to the website and looked to see what were the average LSAT score and the average GPA at that school. And based on what we saw, really, I would have thought she should have gotten some kind of money because her GPA was higher. And so we worked together, compiled the evidence, practiced to ask for that. And so she went back and she was respectful and she said, could you please reevaluate this? I really want to go to this school. I was surprised I didn't get one. I was expecting it based on my GPA and my LSAT score. And can you reevaluate it and just look at it again? And then the next time I talked to her, she did go to that school and she got an actual renewable for all 3 years. But the point of that is when you make your ask, you have to compile your evidence, right? So you want to say, why was I expecting that? Or why do I need the extra money and those type of things. Student loans, here's the thing. Student loans are considered good debt, but at the end of the day, they're still debt, right? And so the best attitude for those is if you can keep it as low as possible, that's going to work in your favor always. But borrow enough so that you can be successful, right? If you need the money to go to law school and you need to pay for living expenses, that's what it's for, right? Borrow the money so that you can be successful. But keep in mind that it will impact in the future. So when you apply for student loans, if you have done this in your undergraduate years, you might have done this already, is when you did have some loans, you will fill out this master promissory note. And if you have never done that, you're going to think it's a really good prep for actually law school, because it is. Heather, how many pages is it? Like 8 or 9 pages of just very fine print that you have to read through, which is all of your obligations and things like that. But it's not fun reading, but it does say that, you are responsible to make sure that you keep the school, the servicer up to date if you move, if there's any changes, the fact that you accept the loan and that you're responsible for repaying it, regardless whether you graduate from school, regardless of you complete it, drop out, didn't like the courses, none of those things make any difference. You're just saying, I'm accepting that money and I'm taking that responsibility. So that's basically what's in that master promissory note. We have a nice little resource at Access Lex, and you can actually find that in the pre-law module as well, which is paying for law school. This is basically most of the stuff that we talked about, but it gives you a nice little handout so that you can kind of go through and make notes again and think about. You can look at, reviewing financing options and just thinking about the different ways that you want to financially prepare for your journey. We have a calculator where you can begin with the end in mind, but we also have pre-law coaching. And the pre-law coaching is really to help you on your journey, on your really financial decision-making journey. Now, you have great access, for example, at the University of Hawaii with Heather, who has a lot of information, lots of resources, and always has your best interest at heart. And then you just have other resources through Access Lex. So if you wanted to talk about things, maybe about how to fine tune, how to ask for more money, how to maybe, what should I write in my personal statement? We have a couple of people in the pre-law coaching team. One of them is actually a JD who went through that JD process. I've done a lot of work in financial aid, so I'm very familiar with that. And then we have a couple of other individuals that are coaches that were admissions directors. And so it's a nice group where you can get a lot of different questions answered. Again, so it might be with admissions, you might have some questions, you might have some questions with financial aid, or you might just have some questions about, walking the journey and getting some tips from somebody who did that themselves. So let me just show you again how you can access some of these free resources. You register and you log in to Ask Edna, you will sign in and you'll become a pre-law student. Once you go to a law school, you'll have to email us and then we will change you over to the law school. But right now you would have access to Max Pre-Law, which is just a toolkit. And when you click on that, the other things you have access to right here are some student success and some bar success. When you get to the actual school, then you're going to have access to Max by Access Lex, which is a personal finance program. And in that personal finance program, we also give away scholarship money. So one of the things that we're trying to do as a nonprofit is to lower overall loan debt. And we do that by helping students learn about money and also giving away those scholarships. When you click on the pre-law, what you're going to see there is you'll click on that and then you'll be able to get into just the landing platform for you, where you can learn a little bit more about choosing a law school, paying for law school, applying for law school, building the budget. Those are all other online events you can attend. They're all free. Then you can look at the most popular resources. When I talk to pre-law students, when we're putting this together, they said, you know what? We love worksheets and checklists. Put those front and center because I like a checklist myself. So I totally get it. And then you can also right here on the bottom is you can schedule a time with myself, a accredited financial counselor, or some of the other pre-law team. Again, the admissions team or Toria, who is an attorney and who went through, she was the first Gen attorney, so she has some insights she can share about how to navigate some of that. And then you just schedule that through the Max Pre-Law coaching. And again, the idea is that you begin with the end in mind. You know where you want to be, and there are decisions that you need to make before, during, and after. And so even before you even start to get to law school, there are going to be some costs involved. Then when you are in law school, you can make some choices about reducing some of the costs and reducing your debt burden, maximizing your scholarships and maximizing your grants. And then again, at the end, when you prepare for passing the bar, that's another time where there are some expenses after law school that you also have to consider. So really looking at that full cycle. And that is all I have for all of you this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to Heather to see if there's anything that you would like to add before we finish it out. And then we'll see if there's anybody has any questions.
Thanks, Jackie. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather, the Director of Law Student Financial Assistance at the law school, Richardson Law School down the way. I just can't thank Jackie enough. Usually in any of my conversations with students thinking about law school, students who are in law school, Access Lex, the name Access Lex always comes up. One, because they're such a great resource, and two, their resources are really dedicated to our law students. Like, one, to just give them information, but two, to get them thinking and to challenge them to create their plan, to keep their plan, to check in with their plan. So, finances are hard, it's very individualized. So talking about it helps. I mean, I do a lot of one-on-ones with our current students, and none of it is ever the same conversation, aside from how do I get more free money. But all the struggles are different, but you're not struggling alone is what I want to say too. So borrowing might be new or applying for scholarships might be new, but just know that everyone should be doing it, getting that information. And the resources are there. Jackie's here, I'm here. We're happy to talk to you. Healy's here for the Pre-Law Advising Center. All of this is available. So don't be afraid. Reach out, and yeah, there's just so much information out there, and depending on what works for you, that's how we try to get you there to your plan.
Yep. Thank you, Heather. Yeah, you're not doing this alone. You have a lot of tools, you have a lot of backup, and enjoy the journey and make use of your resources. That's really the power that's available to you. And I'm going to turn it back over to Healy now.
So as Jackie said, we'll open it up to questions. And if you folks don't have questions, you can always contact us at a later time. I think we'll give it a few minutes, and if not, we'll close out. And want to mahalo you folks for spending time with us today.
not seeing any questions in the chat panel, so that I'm going to also say mahalo, and we'll see all of you next time, potentially in person. Again, please feel free, make some one-on-one coaching appointments, and enjoy the journey.
Mahalo.
Aloha, everybody. Bye-bye.